So, how are you doing?
We're good. We're good. Yeah, I'm fine.
Or how about I say, how you doing?
All right. I knew you were gonna make this so awkward. Okay, how about we just take a second and how about where are all of our married folks? Let's just get our married couples. Okay, great. We're speaking to the right crowd. Now, how about all you married ladies? Just look at your husband and say, "Don't make this awkward." Go ahead, tell him.
Yeah.
Tell him. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, that's good. And you too.
Yeah, I won't make it awkward. I'll try not to. So, yes, we are talking about the topic of sex today. So as Marta said, if you've got kids, let's just say trigger warning, okay? Feel free to take them down to Kids Life. We got a great Kids Life team down there, so that's a plug for them. But anyway, what we're really talking about is romance, okay? And romance is not sex. It can lead to sex, but romance is not sex. So we want to talk about, though, the biblical way to navigate sex, okay? There is a biblical way. God created sex, right? So we want to talk about it. That's important, right? So why don't you go ahead and...
Yeah, no, that's right. And if you're not married in this room, or if you are, like, God forbid, a teenager sitting with your parents right now, we did warn the switch students, our junior high and high school, like, stay out of this room today or you might be scarred for life. But don't tune us out, because as we know, like, no matter what topic we're covering, like, it's all under the umbrella of Jesus and the gospel. Yeah. And we're gonna make sure that we wrap it all in. Mm-hmm. So it's not gonna get too crazy, don't worry. But this may not be a typical Sunday morning topic, but you know, and if it's your first time here, like, you picked a great week. I think you picked this the best week. But come back next week. Just don't worry. But it is February, and like Marta said, we are in a series all about love and marriage. And honestly, what better place to talk about topics like this when we're learning healthy, godly ways and how He designed it to be, right? So we definitely can't skip out on this hot topic. We just can't. So sex is designed by God, like we said, so we're going to talk about it. We are in a series, The 7 Senses of Marriage. So let's think about it. Pop quiz, can you name the senses, all the senses?
So there's 5, right? Okay, well, so.
Yeah.
Sound, hearing, taste, smell, touch.
But that's only 5. What are the other 2?
We don't know the other 2. So we were talking about this last night. We don't actually know what the other 2 are yet.
It's a mystery to us as well.
We are also going to come back and find out.
You got to come back all weeks.
Come back and find out. We don't know what the other 2 senses are as far as Bible stuff goes in marriage.
It's a mystery. So you have to come for all 7 weeks.
Yeah. So today, and like we're going to use the sense of smell, okay? Yeah. Now, don't get weird on me here.
Don't make it weird. Last week we talked about sound. It got
really quiet. I felt like my ears were starting to turn red.
I know, me too. They're like burning.
No, but let us tie this together, okay? This is why, okay? So we'll explain it. So you know, like when you're around people that kind of put off an aroma, right? Like we're going to go with aroma, the vibe, okay? The vibe, okay? So everyone puts off some sort of a vibe, an aroma. And so does our marriage. And let us explain here, okay? So when people come over to your house, you get your house clean, but then what's the next thing you do? Like, you start spraying Febreze and everything, and if it's just us, we put the Scentsy things out everywhere. Because, like, you don't want people to smell your stank. And can we all agree that, like, raise your hand if you're afraid that, like, your normal scent that you put off is stinky. Like, you know what I'm talking about? Like, you're the only other person in here that is worried about if their normal scent is stinky.
Okay, like, everyone's house has, like,
the smell,
you know.
And
like,
I'm so scared that ours is stinky.
We're always nervous. Like, we have a dog and stuff, or, you know, it's a house, so we're always like, okay, all the Scentsies. I have, like, my essential oil right next to my Scentsy, so it's, like, not really that, like, non-toxic. But anyways, you put all the smells, and David's going around with the Febreze. That's just what we do.
Yeah, so today we're talking about recipe for romance, okay? And what we're talking about, so the recipe, we got a recipe that God's created, okay? But really, when you're making something in the kitchen, you're putting ingredients in, and that aroma fills the house, right? Like the smell fills your entire house, the whole space, okay? So we're gonna talk about this, but let's go through this biblically so we can get lined up here, and you guys are at least on the page of why we're tying this to smell, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so 2 Corinthians 2:15 through 16. For we are to God the pleasing aroma of Christ among those who are being saved and those who are perishing. To the one, we are an aroma that brings death. To the other, an aroma that brings life. and who is equal to such a task. So it's biblical, okay? So why don't you go ahead and explain?
Wow, so it's aroma, good or bad? It either brings death
Can
or
be.
life. It's
Can be
positive,
either.
negative. The aroma is a powerful thing, and our marriage, honestly, what this is getting down to is our marriage is meant to reflect, give off an aroma so that everyone around us can sense it. And our marriages are actually meant to be a direct reflection between Jesus Christ and us as his bride. Like, that's what he designed marriage to be. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about.
So let's bring this around to romance, okay?
Yeah.
I notice how I cover my mouth out of like nervousness.
You're being so awkward.
I'm trying not to be. Okay, so for a long time, just so you guys know, we're gonna get raw and real, okay? We're gonna be open and honest. And because I know that through our story, hopefully we can impact a lot of other people's lives. Okay, so for a long time, as a guy, I think this is not always the case. Sometimes a lady lines up with more of the guy cliche or whatever. But for a long time though, I kind of put romance and the sex topic like in its own box. Okay, so what I would do, I'd go to work. Every life is all its own thing. We're all in different categories. But when it came to romance, like I just thought like romance is romance, and like when it's time, like there's no more that goes into it than that. But what we found, what I've learned, is that's just not the case for women, okay?
Yeah.
Typically.
That's right. And it really doesn't need to be thought of as an event or like this separate category all on its own, but actually an environment that we create. In our home and in our marriage, and everybody can sense it, our kids, anybody who comes over, anybody who's part of our lives, it's actually this environment that we create, this aroma.
Yeah.
Just like an aroma, good or bad, takes over a space, our romance, with this recipe that we're talking about, it should take over. It's not an event, but it's an environment that really permeates every single area of our lives.
It's not an event, it's an environment. That's good.
All
okay,
right.
anyway, so basically, though, what we're saying is the way we live our life sends an aroma to God, okay? So he senses that aroma. And by the way, I guess we live with Jesus in our lives. So by the way we live, we send an aroma to God. And it doesn't just stop there. We actually send an aroma to believers in how we spend our lives, okay? So that you want to talk about an aroma can change. You guys have all, how many of us millennials, or how many people, because I know folks, kids drag them to, you remember Hollister?
Can I say this?
Yeah.
My mom used to call it hella.
Susie!
Like, it's dark
Susie.
and it smells.
High schooler, aroma was like, so good, right? Okay. So then there's also, you ever been around someone that just stinks, and the aroma, it fills the room and out, right? Like, yeah, I mean, smells are powerful.
Smells are powerful. So true. And there is an aroma to romance and straight from God, and we're going to talk about, we're going to get into this beautiful atmosphere about, not a sticky one. It's like a delicious meal. You just talked about recipe, like it's time and effort to like a beautiful meal, right? And it takes time and effort to create beautiful romance and this aroma we are talking about.
Yeah. Okay, so to some facts. I like spitting facts. Emily is more not a fact person. I'm a fact person, okay? So Google says that, and I'm going to say only because I feel like the numbers should be way higher. I just think they may have crap. 50% of marriages say they struggle in the area of romance, intimacy, and sex, okay? I personally, like I said, I think that number is very low, but it's a wonderful thing. Unfortunately, when life happens, when other things come into the game, it really it wrecks what be, okay? There's a lot of married couples that they have their honeymoon period, the romance starts to wear off. I think it sounds like that's the cliche. The reason I'm saying that is because that's not the way our marriage went, okay? I think that we topic share it because we did struggle so much on the front end, okay? So, Emily, why don't you tell a little bit about like our story of our marriage and why I'm saying what I'm saying?
So, when we first got we were just babies. We were young. I barely just turned 20. I was still 19. Got married, actually. Went through changes. I did, like, right off the. I mean, it was college. It was all of my parents. Different, school changes, job changes. I was trying to learn how to be a wife, trying to do this marriage thing. Had no idea what I was doing. There's a lot of changes. Everything felt really out of control. And without going into all the details, the thing that really made the front trouble was the fact that I started eating disorder and a lot of health issues. And that obviously presented a lot for us. And I was in a pretty dark place. Some of you may have heard me share a little bit about that a couple years ago, but I struggled with caring much else at that time. I was very what was going on. Yeah. I couldn't care about much, let alone our romance.
So that was a big, because I our marriage with expectation. Okay, I think a lot of us, we have expectation, and anytime you have expectation and it doesn't get met, it really can disappoint. Okay, and expectations were already like impossible to meet, and then you add on the fact that she was struggling and I was an absolute self and was worried that my needs weren't getting met, and that's all I could really focus on. And so here she is, and I'm more focused on the fact that my needs aren't getting met. And so it was very close. Our parents would attest to this through our first year of marriage, which is scary to think. So.
Yeah, we obviously, we had a lot of issues. It was just all those expectations like you're talking about. We're trying to navigate marriage, and you put a big issue and then, pride issues of our own on top. It was just a mess. It really was. We had a lot to learn, and we both had just a lot of unhealthy views of, marriage, what the other person should and should not do.
So that's a good point. The big learn, and we had to get through, is that I was trying to get her to change, really looking at myself, and versa. She was looking at me to change, but not really herself. And I think there's a lot of pretty late into their relationship before they start learning, God's way is not for me to change them. God's way is to change me and me to change me and focus on me and let God on her and pray for her and help her grow and that type of thing. So we didn't really have a honeymoon, per se. It's just kind of now we're getting better over time, right? Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. But it's great. And we have been, we did just great, 11 years, 1 month and 12 days. Exactly. Yeah. And no end in sight.
So we did get married.
Yeah, I feel like we should make our honeymoon since.
Aim for that.
Yeah.
Parents just watched our kids for a week. You guys down for another week?
Yeah. Like 15.
But, okay, become super thankful for we did go through the troubles on the front end because we had to grow through them. So Emily and I, we both grew up with parents that drilled this into our heads that divorce is not an option. And I think that in society, once again, the world tells you, hey, divorce, you can, divorce is a thing, it's a deal. And I'm not saying that to make someone who has been divorced feel guilty. I'm just saying that, when you do marriage God's way, divorce is not an option in your mind. And when it's not an option, you work through what you got to work through. You're not to make it sound negative, and I don't mean it to sound negative, but you're stuck with the person. So let's make it the best it can be, right? You're stuck with it. Make it the best it can be.
It's so true.
Yeah.
We had a lot of work to go through, but I think we started realizing something clicked that, hey, we got to figure this out, and I got to get the help that I need to get, and we need to work together. And ultimately, the enemy meant for evil, God worked it out for good. And now we have a little bit of a story, and we're able to share others. We've some experience, so we love to share.
You ever hear people say, I'm just working on my testimony? You ever hear people say that when they're going through trouble? So we went through troubles, but now we have a testimony, and I just want to encourage people, God, everyone goes through things, and there's that there's that verse, count it all joy when you go through trials of any kind. Well, we count it all joy because like we get to grow God's kingdom through how he brought us through our story, okay? So our rough time. He brought us through it, we worked through it, and now we get to use that story to help other people, right?
Yeah, and every single couple in here, you have a story, and you have a testimony, and you have people that your marriage is meant to touch and influence, and really a legacy.
Yeah.
So it's really, it's an honor that marriage, that we get to do it.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
So, you ready to get into the steps?
I think so.
do
So back to the recipe for romance. Okay, now that we've kind of set it up.
Yeah.
We're taking this to the kitchen. We're talking about aroma, recipes, cooking. So this brings us to our first point. If you're taking notes, which we always encourage you to take notes. But number one, the point is follow the recipe, okay? Follow the recipe. And let's just visualize you're making dinner or baking a cake. Some people are better at baking than cooking or vice versa. I'm not that great at either one. But there's ingredients, right? You got to follow the recipe and you want to, it's step by step to a T, right? You want to follow that recipe.
And that's why when you say, I'm not good at baking, it's because, okay, so Emily always she substitutes, she tries to substitute healthy garbage.
In my
applesauce
past.
for butter or like almond milk for regular milk, and then she wonders why the cake didn't rise or what, like, I don't know.
Raisins instead of chocolate chips.
So in this analogy that I just used, I'm actually equating healthy substitutes as from the devil, okay?
Okay.
All right?
Just use real butter. I learned,
so
okay?
you got to follow the recipe. So if we skip out on the good stuff, the recipe doesn't come out like God intended it to, okay? And so you can't substitute with what the world says about sex and romance, okay? Yeah. And the world says a lot of negative things about it, and that's why we're talking about it here in church, okay? Because it is a positive, God-given thing, and we got to make sure that we focus on that. So it's corny, but it's the truth. So let's talk about God. He wrote the cookbook, right? So he wrote the cookbook. So I'm taking this analogy to a whole nother level.
Oh, so
all right?
corny.
But let's go to the cookbook and let's read a verse, okay? 1 Corinthians 7, 3-4. The husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and likewise the wife to her husband. The wife's body does not belong to her alone, but also to her husband. In the same, the husband's body does not belong to him alone, but also his wife.
Yeah. So basically, when I read that, what I'm reading is that it's about being selfless, right? Like, we're naturally selfish people. We're human, but when we say our vows, when we stand up that day, get married, we're committing to dying to ourselves. To put it biblically, we're dying to ourselves every day, choosing to put the other person first. So dying to ourselves every day. Sometimes at night as well. Hey-o! And choosing to serve each other in every aspect of our marriage is really what that's saying, to be selfless.
So this is something I've gotten wrong a lot, okay? So as a guy, you want your needs to be met, you have a need, and like I said, we have a one-track mind, guys do, okay? So a woman, every single part of the day goes into developing romance. As a guy, that's not the case. As a guy, we're in a one-track mind. Like, if I want something, I'm going to do something to get something, and we make it this transactional thing. Guys do this a lot. Or I think there's a lot of giggles because that's the way guys roll, right?
So many smiles.
So the problem is like, hey, did you see I washed the dishes? You know, like.
Wow, do you want a cookie? You want a gold sticker?
I do, kind of, but we make it a transactional thing. But we can't do that, fellas, okay? I've learned it's not once worked out for me.
We always know.
So 1 Corinthians 16:14, let all you do be done in love. So following the recipe book, fellas, to do it God's way, we gotta do it out of love and love only. Like, I do things to help her because I love her. I do my part. I try to go above and beyond. I'm serving as much as I can to her because I love her, and that's it. And let God do the rest.
Yeah. You are great at this, and for years I didn't see like you really were serving me just just out of love. I see it so much more that you are good at showing me love. So thank you. But this does bring up a good point. Something as you're talking, one of our favorite things that we learned way back in pre-marriage counseling, and it's something that we like to share with the couples that we get to counsel before they get married too, is always look to outserve each other.
Yep.
I would write that down. That's just a little point in and of itself. Always look to outserve each other.
Yeah, if you're going to compete and keep score, don't keep score. But if you're going to compete, outserve each other,
You just said
right?
don't keep score.
Yeah,
but if you're keeping any kind of score, mentally be like, I'm going to outserve,
Yeah.
just how, and it's as simple as like, how can I make your day a little bit easier? How can I make your life just a little bit simpler? What can I take off your plate today? Stuff like that. And we were really terrible about that for a long time. We're selfish, but over time we've realized like it actually is we're speaking each other's love languages a little bit, being in tune with each other. Just like, how can I make your life a little bit simpler today? And, it might be just you like doing the dishes without expecting a gold star for it, or putting the kids to bed
Gold
when
star,
I mix it. When if I'm really, really exhausted one day and he's like, I'll put the kids to bed or whatever, or, if I pack your lunch, just little things like that. It makes all the difference. And like you said, it's really the heart behind it.
Yeah.
If women, like you said just a minute ago too, it's really for women, like it's an all day thing. Like you can't just expect us to, it's the crock pot and microwave theory. Have you all heard that?
Yeah.
If you've come to the XO conference any year, it's so true. Like women are like a crock pot, like a slow cooker. It takes
all day.
It takes all day. Like
You got to start preparing the meal early.
It's a whole thing. It's an environment. Anyway, and guys, if they're like a microwave, you pop that sucker in, you're ready to go.
Okay.
Ready to go.
Okay.
Just a second. It takes a second. More spontaneous.
All right,
However you want to say it.
Moving on. We all have needs that we need met. And guys,
I did not mean to say it like that, by the way.
that's not in the notes written like that.
It's not.
All right. So we all have needs that need met, okay? But you got to have the right heart behind it. Okay, fellas, the ladies know. Like the ladies know when you have a transactional thought process, right? They know.
Yeah.
So don't make it a transactional thing, and just do stuff out of love. Just do stuff because you love her and you're trying to make her life easier and just show her love. So fellas and ladies, if you're married, look at each other right now and just say, I dare you to outserve me.
I dare you to outserve me. Say it. Say it. All right, so talking about serving each other, and when it comes to this particular romantic need that we're talking about, let's look at what this verse says. A lot of these verses are from 1 Corinthians.
Yeah.
You probably thought we were going to just be Song of Solomon this whole time, but 1 Corinthians 7:5 says, do not deprive each other, except perhaps by mutual consent and for a time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer. So say if you're fasting or whatnot. Then come together again so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Okay, so when we put this in the context of following the recipe, like we're talking about, we're meant to be, what this is saying is that we're meant to be intimate and close often.
Yeah.
It's meant to be a regular thing on a regular basis. And it's also worth mentioning that, like, we're the only ones who can fulfill each other's needs. And you're their only outlet, so we don't want to deprive them, cause them to struggle. So God created marriage so that there's a closeness, that there's this intimacy all the time. So, and when we're not, it causes issues.
Yeah, and so just like God's recipe, or just like everything else, God has this recipe for romance, for success in our lives. Well, just like everything else, the devil's trying to wreck that recipe, okay? So he is trying to get you to put in other ingredients that don't belong in the recipe and stuff like that. So what ends up happening when the devil's trying to divide us, okay? So you go a long time without coming together as man and wife. And what ends up happening, okay.
I'm still stuck on how I said the microwave thing. Let me just take a moment, stop dwelling. I meant like food, okay? I meant like an item of food. Pop that in. That's awesome. Okay.
But what we do though is we start getting distant from each other, okay? And I think you guys, a lot of people have been there, but the longer you go, the more it's just you're awkward around each other. You just feel like you're not on the same page. Everything just feels distant, awkward, and So
get attitudes with each other.
yeah, you get attitudes, you start fighting, all that stuff. So, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely been one of our most common fights.
Oh, for
if
sure.
you want to call it a fight. Like, if it were up to him, we'd do it every night. But men and women are wired differently, right? We know that. We're wired differently. We have different needs. And we have to be in tune with that.
Yeah.
And what I have learned, and I feel like this is important as a woman to just share, and like when it's a no kind of night, okay, when it's a no kind of night, like the tone of the no matters. It really does. If I say no, just how I want to say it or how I'm feeling, like I can't believe you would even
And
think.
you have. Can we just say she has?
Okay.
Like, no.
No, David. But we have learned over the years, like this is pretty much my response is what, it's maybe not even the ask, but it's the response, it's the tone. And so if I just say, like, I can't believe you would even ask me that, you know what kind of day I have, don't touch me, don't breathe on me, whatever, like, what we need to do, we need to approach it, just respond differently. That's what I've learned, and that takes self-control, that takes, like, a cleansing breath, like, maybe, how about let's take a rain check tomorrow night.
A no with an appointment.
A no
right?
with an appointment,
Yeah.
exactly. And
I can
guess
handle that. I can handle
you can
that.
handle that.
Yeah.
If
When you
I
see the
let
light
you
at the
down
end of the
easy,
tunnel,
there's a light.
yeah.
But like or maybe just have a conversation, explain like, well, where you're at, just kind of be on the same page with each other. But yeah, the tone of the no.
Yeah.
I don't want you to feel rejected. It's not just like when I say no in a nasty way, I make you feel like it's not just the act that I'm rejecting, but it's like you as a whole.
Yeah,
and
that's
that's
true.
where we've been.
That's
like
true.
guys,
It's very true.
you never want to make them feel rejected as a person, make them feel unloved.
That's very true. So, and adversely, guys, so when she is having a no type of a day, I think we need to be sensitive to the fact that she is having a no type of day. And like, you know, we're doing it, this is all a give and take here. So we want to do our best to, hey, like, you know, I see she's having a rough day. I'm going to do stuff to help her. And, you know, let's do the dishes. Let's try to get the house clean because she's having a frazzled type of a day. Let her just chill, whatever. Like for her, it's like, hey, why don't you, here's $20. Go to Big Lots and let me clean the house. I don't know.
$20 ain't going to give me much.
Oh my goodness.
I'll go to Starbucks and just
balling on a budget. Okay?
I'll just go to Starbucks and sit in the parking lot in silence. That's what I would do.
But if she's having that type of rough day, let's be sensitive to the fact of that, and let's not ask when we know, you know, it's that type of a day. So the other thing is if she does say no, I'm not going to say that I've done this, but don't act like a 3-year-old and throw a hissy fit about it, right?
You've definitely never done that.
Yeah. So I guess the main point in what we're saying here is like sometimes serving each other isn't just, you know, the actions that we take, but it's also the reactions and just like that general attitude of like, I can serve her by being sensitive to her and knowing that today's not the right day, you know?
Yeah.
So
we're meant to, you know, be each other's life partners, make life easy on each other. Let's not make everything, you know, we're serving each other. That's really what this whole point is just how can I serve you and out-serving each other. So point number 1, follow the recipe. And remembering that God created the cookbook, if you want to say, and if we want to create that aroma of marriage, that romance that we talked about, we're serving each other with love. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to point number 2. Set the temperature, okay? Keep it hot. See how we're rolling with the kitchen theme. I really wanted to like have a whole bowl. We're throwing in ingredients, but he got a little bit carried away with that idea. So set the temperature. If you're baking a cake, let's visualize, you have to bake it at the right temperature, right? You can't just like, if the recipe calls for, I don't know, 400 degrees or something, that might scorch a cake. But if the recipe calls for 400 degrees and you just like decide to just put it on 200, like that cake's not going to come out right. It's not going to look right. It's not going to taste right. We need to make sure we're intentionally setting the temperature of our marriage as well, and not getting cold on each other. Like he said, like we want to keep things hot. We want to keep things fresh. And I thought, why don't we go like list through a few ways how we can let the temperature get cold in our marriage. And we're not gonna like make you raise your hand or anything, and these may or may not be personal examples that have happened to us.
Either, okay?
Don't elbow each other. But okay, a couple ways we can our marriage may be getting cold is having attitudes with each other or being rude.
Yep.
Okay, keeping score, like we talked about. Not intentionally setting aside time and energy for each other. How about avoiding each other, or maybe sitting next to each other and scrolling your phones, like calling that like time together, just sitting next to each other on your phones? We've definitely never done that. How about falling into complete routine and not putting in efforts to keep your lives fun? Like you're just kind of like sitting around like bumps on a log. Like, okay, you're not keeping it fun. What about being overly critical of each other? That's one. Again, totally have never been there. What about putting expectations on our spouses through comparison or of social media or whatever you may think? I feel like as I'm reading, I'm pretty sure you put this on. Okay, you put this one in here.
I added something in the notes that she didn't know.
Because I would not personally say this, but it says coming home and throwing on the same sweatpants and robe you always wear. Okay. He's coming
it's like
from
a straight jacket. Like there's no, it's a no day when the robe is on, right?
He's coming from my green fuzzy robe. Okay. Come on. Well, how about those holy boxers that your mom bought you before you moved out?
Still
11 years ago.
Still got them, Mom. Nostalgic.
That's right. That is a romance wrecker right there. So there's some things.
Yeah. So let's go through the adverse part of this list, okay?
Yeah.
So instead of, having attitudes with each other and being rude, let's try to treat each other with the same excitement level that maybe like, you treat the dog when you walk in the door and greet the dog with. Like, greet me the way you greet the dog.
You're attacking me.
Yeah.
I love her.
So the other thing is like, instead of cuddling with the dog in bed, cuddle with your spouse in bed. Sometimes they feel left out.
She's so fluffy though. Oh.
So, all right. So instead of keeping score, forget that there's not a scoreboard. So there's no point in trying to keep score. Okay. Save time and energy for each other. Be intentional about saving time and energy, okay? So I think the last time sex was talked about from the stage, John and Britt did it a few years ago. We talked about how they were going through some struggles, and so they actually set a schedule. Okay, so they put it on the calendar. Well,
Tuesdays and Sundays.
I still remember the days.
I told Brittany this the other day. She's like, "You remember that?" I'm like, "Heck yeah, I do."
So put it on the calendar. So after we heard that, and that's really when we were still struggling with stuff, and so we put it on the calendar. And what it did though is it helped us develop a habit, of doing it. But also, like when it's coming, well then there's more romance that I can provide, and we can flirt through the day and kind of lead up to it. It helps set the mood and the tone. Okay. So that's maybe an idea for other people. So it helped us, Maybe when you're with each other, shut the phone off or put it in the other room. We're guilty of that too, Like put it in the other room and like just spend time together, Throw away the nasty robe.
I'm not doing it.
Or I guess the boxers with the holes in them.
Those are just going to disappear.
They make comfortable clothes that also are not disgusting. We got to go get some, but they make them. So,
a good pair of joggers.
Yeah. So, and then here's a big one is I think instead of scrolling through Facebook and Instagram and you start comparing to your spouse to other people you see, whether that's lusting after looks or lusting after the things that another husband or wife is doing for their spouse, don't compare. If that's what Facebook and Instagram are causing you to do, delete the app. Just delete it because it's not worth it. And then I think we would be doing a disservice if we didn't also talk about this. And that's, you keep pornography out of your marriage. Pornography in any facet, it is the worst world's view of what sex is and how God designed it. And it has no place in our marriage whatsoever. It does nothing but completely ruin the view of like what God intended sex to be. So, speaking of what God intended sex to be, how many people know what an acrostic is, right? So S-E-X. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what sex means in godly terms.
Yeah.
A good acrostic. S, it is supernatural, okay? So it's supernatural and it's created by God, right? Okay. So E, it's exciting and enjoyable, right? and it needs to be mutually enjoyable, right? So we got to be mutually enjoying ourselves, and that's where God's recipe book leads us. We want to enjoy each other, okay? Enjoy each other's company. And X, it's not X-rated, it's God created. Just so you know, I stole this. I'm not that good. Yeah. But anyway, it's not X-rated, it's God created. I love that big time. So, all right, and then the last thing, and I think this is the biggest way to keep things hot, and especially if you're in our age group, and that is get rid of your kids every now and again. Don't prioritize them. Prioritize your marriage and your spouse. You know,
prioritize them to an extent.
We need to prioritize them, but they also see the thing is though is we need to show our kids what a healthy, godly marriage looks like. Okay, so in order to do that, we've got to prioritize our marriage, and like things fall into line. God works things together, and we're setting our kids up for a win later on in their life when they've seen us do it the right way, right? So I actually have an acrostic for kids.
So many
All right,
acrostics.
this isn't going to go on the board.
You don't have to put this in your notes, but you
Kids, Kids, keeping intimacy at a distance successfully.
Boom.
Right? So that's what kids do. That's what
funny.
they do.
That's funny. It's true. They can really put a damper on the romance.
Yes,
but
they can.
It's funny, but it is worth mentioning. Like, kids take a lot of our attention, a lot of our time. And when we, they're sports, they're extracurriculars, all the things. But like you said, when we put our marriage first, it's setting that example for them. And I would also insert the fact that, like, as women, as wives, as moms, if you've got kids in here, like, how important it is for me to remember, like, I'm not just mom, like, I'm his wife first. So like you said, prioritizing, keeping things in that godly, biblical order, and then everything flows from it. Your house runs a whole lot smoother.
So we have to be intentional, and we have to spend quality time to keep things hot, okay? You can't unplug the crock pot. Keep it plugged in, and let's do things God's way, because otherwise the meal's getting cold and gross.
Yes,
so
that is true.
I will say, too, so we're running out of time, so we need to get going a little quicker here. So number 3, clean out the pantry. Clean out your pantry, all right?
Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead?
Okay, so what we mean by this, like, okay, ladies, you've seen Marie Kondo, right? Like the Sparking Joy, like these beautiful Pinterest-worthy pantries.
Yeah.
It's just of my dreams, like all the neutral colors and the beautiful containers. Like we all desire like that kind of organization in our life, right? Well, what do we need to do to get our marriage organized and get things cleaned out and get all the junk out? Because we all bring, old habits, old addictions, past hurts, whatever it may be, into our marriage. And we've got to organize it into something we can work with. And that's what we need to do in our marriage. So we got to lay it all out, get rid of, there might be some expired stuff like in our pantries per se. And we got to work through things. This point is all about like talking, being honest, having conversations with each other, working things out.
Yeah, open communication, keeping open communication. If we don't know where each other are at, then how are we ever going to get to where we want to go together if we don't know on the map where each other are at? So you have to communicate. And let me just say, Emily and I have had to have some really hard conversations to have, and we both brought baggage. I mean, we may have gotten married young, but there's baggage still that you bring into the marriage that you got to work through. And we had to work through that baggage together, get down in the trenches, help each other get through it, do it together. And really, that's what made the big difference in our marriage. So in order to do marriage the right way, you've got to talk stuff out, right? So go ahead.
You gotta clean out the pantry. Like, there's no reason to be cooking with expired ingredients.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Get rid of them. And something I want to add to this point too, while we're in the kitchen, while we're cleaning out our pantries, we should clean out our fridges too, which is usually where we keep our leftovers, right? Do I have some leftovers, people in here? Like, I can make another meal out of this. Like, I'm bringing home, like, can I have a box? Like, I'm that kind of person. I like a good leftovers. Don't touch my leftovers. But then we also, I want to bring this around where I'm going with this is that don't give each other your leftovers, okay? Don't go all throughout your day spending all your energy, all your kindness, on everyone else, but then, housework, all your duties of the day, your kids, whatever, and then you get home, like, he gets home, and I'm just like, Okay.
Yeah.
Don't give him the time of day. Like, it may be that kind of, like, maybe I've had a hard day and I'm like, don't touch me, don't look at me. But that may be the very time that, like, he needs me the most. Like, he needs to feel that closeness.
Yeah.
Or on the flip side, like, he may have had a rough day. He wants to come home and just, like, zone out. That might be the very night that, like, I need to emotionally connect. I need to have a conversation. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, finding just not giving each other the leftovers, but honestly giving each other your best, because they're your person. Like, they deserve your best. So
Yeah, and that's like, I mean, I'll go to work all day, be nice to everybody else. I'm nice to complete strangers that I've never met. But then I come home and if I treat her harsh, that doesn't do me any good either. So we'll get into this has happened, I'm pretty sure, to every married couple. You get into like a catty argument and you're being harsh with each other, and then like the phone rings, it'll be like, rah, 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 hello? It's
Hey,
like,
girl.
okay, like let's treat each other the way we treat whoever we're answering the phone to, right? Like, we've got to learn to be patient. I think it's really easy when you get comfortable with someone, you let your guard down. Well, like, it's okay to let your guard down, you want to, but you also need to be intentional about keeping the attitude right, the tone right with your spouse as well. So let's not be like that, right?
Let's not do
So, okay, getting into the last step, and this is part of the ingredients, the recipe is enjoy the meal, okay? So we're best friends. Like, you married your best friend. You married her for a reason, or you married him for a reason. You're each other's best friends. Like, spend time together, do stuff you enjoy doing, right? Enjoy the meal. So, like, I happen to know of a couple in here that goes ballroom dancing together now, right? So they do stuff like that. Find an activity to do together. Find an activity to do together. I joke with him all the time about it, but I hear his hips don't lie. That's what I heard. So, but cook together, take walks. I mean, we have a couple shows we watch, but I'll tell you that the devil tries to divide there, because sometimes she'll watch it without me, and then, we've all been there, right? Like, you're 6 episodes ahead,
Yeah.
But just enjoy the meal. So to recap, okay, that went through it really quick,
That's
but
a quick
we're running out of
point,
time.
but enjoy each other.
Just find ways to enjoy each other's time. So, okay, so 1, follow the recipe. 2, set the temperature. 3, clean out the pantry. And 4, enjoy the meal.
That's good. So when we follow that recipe, when we do those steps, it will create that beautiful aroma that we talked about of romance that honors God, really, because that's ultimately what we want our marriages to be like, just God honoring and beautiful to everyone around us, and that's how He designed it to be. So it is possible in our marriages, even if you find yourself in this like hopeless kind of place this morning. We hope that this can just kind of inspire you. You can. God's going to speak. We believe God will speak to you right wherever you are in your marriage, and it is possible to create a beautiful aroma, a romance, if you want to say. And honestly, like we said, this marriage is all about reflecting Jesus Christ and the gospel of Jesus. And throughout Scripture, the only relationship that mirrors God and with His people is marriage. Like, that's how seriously God takes marriage. So we should take it seriously too, right? It shouldn't just be some afterthought or some leftover thing. Like, marriage should be really important to us. And we are married to glorify God. We're married to reflect the gospel. We didn't get married just to get what we want out of it. We didn't get married just to, how we want it, how we need it. I'm married to glorify God, and I'm married to represent God.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
Yeah.
So, okay, so now we're kind of wrapping up. So if you see, the whole premise is, let's have a heart to serve our spouse, have a heart for our spouse, and realize, like, I mean, they're our person. So, like, let's make life the best we can make it, right? Yeah. So what I want to do now is, if you're married in here, grab the hand of your spouse, okay? And if you're not, we're going to pray over you. If you're not married or your spouse isn't here, just pray for a spouse.
Yeah.
So if you're single, just pray for a spouse. But let's hold hands and let's pray really quick, okay? God, we thank you so much for marriage, and we thank you for the gift of sex and the gift of romance. And God, we thank you that you give us a recipe for how to do this in a successful way, God. We thank you so much for every couple in here, every married couple in here, every single person in here. Lord, I just pray that you would bless their relationships or their future relationships, God. Help us to just remember what we've learned here today, remember the recipe for romance, and just learn to have successful relationships, God.